The galaxy was in chaos. For generations, wars had burned between worlds and border conflicts never truly ended. Every planet fought to protect what little it had: minerals, water, or power. Treaties were signed, then broken. Armies rose and fell. Trust had vanished long ago. No one remembered what true peace even looked like. The Galactic Council, once a powerful voice for diplomacy, was now only a shadow of its former self. Its members gathered again, tired and desperate, their empires weakened by years of fighting. So they sent out one last message, a plea for peace. It was transmitted on every known frequency, across every sector of space. The message was simple: let there be peace. Let there be an end to destruction. It echoed through the stars, bouncing from world to world, carried by satellite stations, and even old communication buoys left from forgotten wars. Many species heard it. The proud Valtari heard it, their fleets reduced by rebellion. The Keisha Consortium heard it, counting their lost colonies. The gentle Aurelians heard it, praying for a miracle. But although the message touched countless worlds, no one moved. Everyone wanted peace, yet no one was brave enough to risk the first step. They all feared betrayal. Every civilization had been tricked before. They thought, why should we answer this time? Why should we trust anyone again? Days passed, then weeks. The plea for peace drifted through the void, fading into background noise, just another forgotten broadcast in an endless universe. Many thought it would die there, just like the hopes of those who sent it. But somewhere far from the core worlds, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, the message was received. It reached Earth. Humans had always been seen as strange among galactic species. Their planet, called a death world by others, was dangerous beyond reason. Its weather could kill, its animals were predators, its diseases could destroy entire species. Yet somehow humans survived and thrived. Where other beings would have perished, humans adapted. They learned, they endured, they built civilizations from chaos. They were creatures of resilience born from struggle. When the Galactic Council's message arrived, it wasn't ignored. It was analyzed, discussed, and debated. The leaders of Earth gathered, representing the unified human colonies, a network of worlds connected by shared history and unshakable determination. Some were cautious, saying, "It's not our war." Others, however, remembered humanity's own past, how once, long ago, their nations had been divided by endless conflict, and how they too had dreamed of peace. There was silence for a while, as the Council's transmission played again in the great chamber of the Terran Alliance. The words sounded weary, full of sorrow. The human delegates listened carefully, exchanging glances. Then one admiral spoke, her voice calm but firm. They called for peace. Let's show them what it takes to keep it. And just like that, the decision was made. The response from Earth was brief, almost humble. Message received. Humanity acknowledges your call. Assistance is coming. Across the galaxy, few noticed the reply. Those who did either laughed or trembled. The Deathworlders, they said. They're sending their warriors to make peace? Impossible. They'll bring destruction, not harmony. The name Deathworlder carried both fear and fascination. To most aliens, humans were unpredictable. Kind one moment, terrifying the next. They had survived worlds others called uninhabitable. They had fought wars no sane species would dare. But one truth was undeniable. Wherever humans went, change followed. Soon, long-range sensors began detecting movement, massive fleets emerging from hyperspace routes near the galactic rim. These ships were different from the delicate ornamental vessels most civilizations used. Human ships were built like fortresses. Heavy armor plating, angular hulls, engines that burned brighter than suns. Each one bore the insignia of the Terran Peace Corps, an organization newly formed from both military and humanitarian branches. To the frightened worlds of the Council, it looked like an invasion. News networks across the galaxy broadcasted panic. The Deathworlders are mobilizing. Are they coming to conquer us? But when the first human transmissions arrived, they carried no threats, only coordination requests. They asked where help was needed most, where the fighting was worst, and which refugees needed evacuation. Still, mistrust lingered. For so long, power in the galaxy had meant domination. No one could believe that humans were different. When the first fleet entered Council space, the reactions were mixed. The Valtari High Command ordered their defense platforms to stand ready. The Aurelians sent diplomats to beg for understanding. The council itself sent a cautious greeting. "We thank you for your response, Deathworlders. But please remember, this is a mission of peace." The human commander replied with a calm smile that was broadcast across the network. "We understand. Peace is what we came for. But peace," she added, "is not built by words alone." That sentence would be remembered across the stars. In the following days, human transports arrived carrying engineers, mediators, doctors, and even cultural envoys. Yet their warships remained close by like silent guardians. They didn't point their weapons outward in challenge, but kept them ready to defend the innocent. Their presence was unsettling to many, but their actions soon began to change minds. In systems still burning from war, human relief fleets landed supplies where none dared to go. They rebuilt damaged orbitals, repaired generators, and helped alien refugees find shelter. And when pirates or raiders tried to attack these missions, the Deathworlder escorts moved swiftly and decisively, stopping the violence before it could spread. They didn't boast. They didn't conquer. They simply acted. For the first time in years, the galaxy saw something it had forgotten. Order. Not enforced by fear, but by discipline and compassion. The humans seemed to carry a strange balance between kindness and strength. They smiled easily, but their eyes held the weight of understanding, of what conflict truly cost. Whispers spread across the stars. Maybe they really came for peace, some said. Maybe this time it's real. Others still doubted. "You can't trust Deathworlders," they warned. "They'll turn their fleets against us once we're weak." But as weeks turned into months, that never happened. Instead, humans continued to help. They trained alien peacekeepers. They shared technology designed not for war, but for stability. Energy shields, medical replicators, food synthesizers. Their presence slowly knit broken alliances back together. Even the Council began to regain some of its lost authority, this time backed not by fear, but by the example the Deathworlders set. Still deep inside, everyone knew one thing. The humans' power was not something to take lightly. They carried peace as a soldier carries a weapon, with respect and readiness to use it when all else fails. And so, when people spoke of the humans' arrival, they did not say, "The Deathworlders came to fight," they said. "The Deathworlders came to answer." Because in a galaxy filled with silence and hesitation, they were the only ones who had dared to respond to a cry for peace. The moment their ships appeared in the skies of the Council's homeworld, millions watched through their broadcasts. Vast shadows fell across the cities as the human vessels descended gracefully. There was fear, yes, but also awe. For beneath the steel and power of their ships was a quiet promise. They had not come to conquer, but to protect. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt something new. Hope. The call for peace had not been ignored after all. Someone had listened. Someone had cared enough to come. From that day forward, the message of the Galactic Council took on new meaning. Whenever it was repeated, people no longer heard desperation. They heard a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, someone might still answer the call. And though no one could predict what would come next, one truth echoed through every system. When the Deathworlders move, the galaxy pays attention, because they are the kind who do not just speak of peace. They deliver it. When the human fleet entered Council space, it wasn't what anyone expected. Other species usually sent diplomats or small escort ships when attending peace talks. They came with gifts, banners, and speeches filled with promises. But the humans were different. They didn't arrive quietly or politely. They came in ships that looked like thunderclouds made of steel, massive, armored, and clearly built for war. Every ship carried the scars of previous battles, like reminders of what humanity had survived. Their vessels didn't shine with decoration or gold like the fleets of noble empires. Instead, they were practical, sturdy, and built to endure the worst the universe could throw at them. Thick hulls, reinforced plating, engines that burned blue-white like stars. It was the fleet of a species that had learned long ago that survival wasn't given freely. The sight of them entering orbit sent ripples of fear through the galactic networks. In the meeting halls of the Council, diplomats panicked. "They're preparing for invasion," shouted one delegate from the Valtari Union. "We called for peace and they bring warships." The Aurelians, a gentle race of healers, trembled at the sight. Even the hardened soldiers of the Keisha Confederacy whispered nervously. Everyone saw the human ships and assumed one thing: aggression. But they were wrong. Inside those ships there were no plans for conquest. The humans hadn't come to dominate or threaten. They came with a simple, powerful belief: peace must be protected. They knew words alone could not hold back violence. Every human understood that peace meant nothing if the innocent could not be defended. And so when they answered the Galactic Council's call, they brought not only diplomats but soldiers, engineers, medics, and supply fleets. They came prepared to build a peace that would last. When their fleet approached the devastated world of Tyrell, the Council's meeting planet, the damage was clear even from orbit. The cities were shattered ruins, still smoking from past bombardments. Whole regions were nothing but craters and twisted metal. The world that was supposed to represent diplomacy had become a graveyard of failed truces. As the human fleet descended, their commanders scanned the surface and immediately saw the danger. The planet was unstable, vulnerable, and undefended. Pirates, mercenaries, or rogue fleets could strike at any time. If peace talks were to succeed, this world had to be safe first. The human admiral, a tall woman named Arya Voss, stood before her crew and gave a single order: begin rebuilding. Talk comes later. Protection comes first. Within hours, hundreds of human dropships filled the skies. They didn't wait for permission from the Council. They simply got to work. Soldiers set up perimeter defenses, engineers deployed shield generators, and drones began clearing debris from the old battlefields. The humans didn't waste time with ceremonies or grand speeches. They just acted. At first, the alien delegates were outraged. "They are fortifying the planet," one shouted. "They are preparing to take control." Fear spread through the Council like wildfire. But then something unexpected happened. The humans started helping, not just themselves, but everyone. When alien relief workers struggled to move supplies through ruined streets, human soldiers lifted entire beams off them. When a communications tower collapsed, human engineers rebuilt it using spare parts from their ships. They didn't ask for thanks and they didn't demand obedience. They simply helped because it was the right thing to do. Slowly, the fear began to fade. The delegates watched through observation windows as the Deathworlders worked tirelessly. Their machines hummed, their drones moved with precision, and their people never complained. Even when acid rain fell from the poisoned skies of Tyrell, the humans kept going, wearing thick armor suits and laughing at the challenge. To the other species, it was a strange sight. Most races avoided hardship whenever possible, but humans seemed to welcome it. They faced storms, radiation, and exhaustion with stubborn determination. A Valtari officer watching from a bunker said quietly, "They treat danger like an old friend." Within 3 days, the main council district had power again. Roads were cleared, water systems repaired, and shield towers were active around the meeting zone. The humans had turned chaos into structure in less than a week. Where others saw ruins, they saw potential. Then came the first real moment of understanding. One night, while repairs continued, a group of alien refugees approached the human camp. Their homes had been destroyed in the last battle, and they were starving. Without hesitation, the humans shared their rations and medical kits. They didn't ask what species they were or what side they had fought for. They just said, "You're safe here now." The next morning, those same refugees began helping the humans rebuild. They carried tools, moved debris, and learned how to operate the Terran machines. Word spread quickly through the camps. The Deathworlders were not here to conquer. They were here to protect. By the time the Council's peace delegates arrived, Tyrell looked different. The landing zones were secure, refugee shelters were standing, and communication towers glowed again. The planet wasn't fully restored, but it was no longer dying, and at the heart of it all stood the humans, covered in dust and sweat but still standing tall. When the delegates stepped out of their shuttles, they saw something that silenced every argument. A massive banner hung from a half-repaired building. It bore a simple human phrase translated into hundreds of alien tongues: peace through strength, safety through unity. The council chamber was rebuilt from the ruins of an old fortress. Inside, human technicians quietly checked power grids and air systems to ensure the talks could begin safely. When alien diplomats finally entered, they were greeted not by soldiers with weapons drawn, but by engineers offering tea and water. The air smelled faintly of metal and hope. Many couldn't understand how such a fierce-looking species could act with such calm purpose. They were used to empires that demanded loyalty, armies that forced peace at gunpoint. But the humans did something different. They protected first, then spoke. Their message was simple. If peace was to mean anything, it had to be backed by the will to defend it. Some aliens still doubted them. They whispered among themselves, calling the humans hypocrites, but others began to see the truth. Every defense tower the humans built wasn't aimed outward. It was aimed at the sky, ready to stop anyone who dared to attack the peace conference. They were not preparing for conquest. They were preparing for protection. In private moments, alien engineers even admitted admiration. Their technology is brutal, one said, but efficient. They waste nothing. Human engineers laughed in response. When you grow up on a death world, they said, you learn not to waste anything. Not time, not effort, not hope. For the first time in decades, Tyrell had working lights at night. From orbit, the human ships could see glowing lines tracing the rebuilt streets like veins of gold. To many, it looked like the planet itself was coming back to life. The council representatives gathered finally, ready to discuss peace. They expected the humans to dominate the talks, to demand authority. But the human admiral only said one thing before taking her seat. The floor is yours. We'll guard the door. That sentence stunned the entire chamber. The humans didn't come to lead. They came to protect the chance for others to speak freely. It was a gesture that none had anticipated, and it changed everything. Outside, as the negotiations began, the human guards stood watch under the rebuilt towers. They scanned the skies for any sign of threat. They didn't relax even for a moment. They had learned too well from their own history that peace is fragile, that it can be destroyed in a heartbeat if not protected, and so, while diplomats debated and ambassadors exchanged words, the Deathworlders continued their quiet work, building walls, restoring power grids, and fortifying the future one bolt at a time. What had started as fear turned into respect. What had looked like aggression revealed itself as strength guided by purpose. The humans showed that their weapons were not symbols of domination, but tools of protection. They came to prove that true peace isn't born from weakness. It's sustained by those strong enough to defend it. By the time the first week of talks ended, every alien on Tyrell had seen the same truth with their own eyes. The Deathworlders didn't come to take control of the galaxy. They came to give it something far greater: safety. And as the sun set over the once ruined world, its light glinting off newly repaired towers and human ships resting in orbit, one thought echoed across every mind on Tyrell. Perhaps this was what peace really looked like. Not soft words or fragile promises, but strong hands rebuilding a broken world. The peace talks on Tyrell had finally begun, but the air inside the great council chamber was heavy with tension. Representatives from dozens of species sat around the shining oval table, speaking in calm tones that barely hid their mistrust. Outside, human soldiers stood guard, keeping a watchful eye on the skies while their ships remained in orbit above, ready for anything. For the first few days, the discussions went well enough. The Galactic Council debated the new peace terms, and the humans listened patiently, speaking only when asked. But as the talks continued, unease began to grow. Many alien diplomats couldn't understand why the humans kept their warships so close to the planet. The sight of those massive vessels, each one bristling with defensive guns and heavy armor, made the more delicate species nervous. "Why do they keep their weapons here during peace talks?" whispered a delegate from the Keisha Confederacy. "If they truly come for peace, shouldn't they disarm?" Others agreed. To them, peace meant weakness, vulnerability, and the total absence of weapons. But the humans had a different view. For them, peace was something you protected, not something you begged for. One senator, an elderly Valtari with silver skin and calm eyes, finally stood and voiced what many were thinking. "You cannot enforce peace with power," he said. "Peace must come from trust, not fear." His words echoed across the chamber. Many nodded in agreement, glancing at the human delegation with suspicion. The human admiral, Arya Voss, rose slowly from her seat. She was not angry, only firm. "Senator," she said, "you are right. Peace must come from trust. But trust means nothing to those who use chaos as a weapon. We keep our power not to rule, but to shield those who cannot fight back. Her words were calm, but the tension did not fade. The aliens had lived through centuries of warlords and empires. To them, anyone with weapons was a threat, no matter their promises. They feared that humanity's protection might turn into domination. Even as they spoke of unity, their hearts were divided by suspicion. Then everything changed in a single moment. It began with a faint alarm from the control room, an incoming signal. A human officer whispered something to Admiral Voss, and her eyes hardened. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The chamber's alarm lights dimmed and a holographic image flickered to life in the air above the table. A fleet was approaching. Dozens of ships, raiders, scavengers, mercenaries. They had no flags, no allegiance, only hunger. These were the kind of forces that thrived on chaos, waiting for moments of weakness. They had seen the Council's distress signals, and they had come to take advantage of the confusion. "They're pirates," said one of the human officers. "They're jamming communications and moving fast. Estimated contact, 15 minutes. Panic erupted. The alien delegates shouted over each other, demanding evacuation. "We must leave the planet at once," cried one. "If they reach orbit, we'll be slaughtered." Council guards tried to maintain order, but fear spread like wildfire. For so long, these worlds had lived under threat. They knew what raids meant: death, fire, and ruin. Within minutes, escape shuttles began launching. Council ships lifted off from the surface, scattering into the sky. The alien fleets in orbit started jumping to hyperspace, trying to flee before the raiders arrived. In the chaos, transmissions filled the air, pleas for help, coordinates of distress, desperate cries. But one fleet didn't move. The Deathworlders stayed. Human ships turned in perfect formation, engines flaring bright. Their massive cruisers aligned into a defensive wall between the raiders and the planet. Inside the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Voss gave quiet orders. "Activate shields. Target weapons to disable, not destroy. No unnecessary fire." Her officers nodded without hesitation. They knew what she meant. Show control, not dominance. Show restraint. As the raider fleet entered range, their ships opened fire. Energy bolts streaked across the void, slamming against human shields in bursts of light. But the Deathworlders didn't flinch. Their ships absorbed the impact and responded with precision fire. Each human shot was deliberate, targeting engines and weapons instead of life support or reactors. They wanted to end the threat, not exterminate their enemies. In orbit, the battle unfolded like a deadly dance. Raiders tried to swarm the humans, darting in and out, firing wildly. But they had never fought soldiers like these. Humans moved with teamwork born from centuries of survival. Every vessel covered the next, their formations shifting like a living wall. Where one ship took damage, others closed ranks to shield it. Down on Terrell, alien delegates watched the sky, trembling. Through the windows of the council tower, they could see flashes of blue and gold light above the clouds. Some whispered prayers, believing the end had come. But soon they began to notice something strange. The explosions were moving away from the planet, not toward it. On the council's central screen, the human commander's calm voice echoed. "Enemy engines disabled. Boarding crews moving in for capture. No civilian casualties detected." The alien stared in disbelief. How could anyone fight so effectively, yet so carefully? In every war they knew, battles ended in slaughter. But the humans fought differently. They were surgical, measured. They used their strength not to destroy, but to control the chaos. Within an hour, it was over. The raider fleet, once a deadly swarm, now drifted helplessly in space. Engines were dead, weapons offline. Human boarding. Teams had taken their leaders prisoner and transmitted surrender signals. Thousands of lives, both innocent and enemy, had been spared. The sky grew quiet again. Slowly, the alien ships that had fled began returning. They approached the orbit cautiously, expecting to see ruins. Instead, they found the human fleet standing intact, guarding the planet as promised. In the council chamber, silence filled the room. The delegates sat frozen, their eyes fixed on the report streaming in. Every one of them had witnessed the same thing: power used with purpose, not arrogance. Finally, the Valtari senator who had argued against humanity stood again. His voice was quiet now, almost ashamed. "You fought without cruelty," he said. "You could have destroyed them easily, yet you did not." Admiral Voss gave a small nod. "Peace," she replied softly, "means protecting even those who do not understand it yet. We don't fight because we want war. We fight because someone must stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." Her words carried more weight than any speech given before. Around her, alien leaders looked at one another with new eyes. They had doubted the Deathworlders, believing their strength made them dangerous, but now they saw the truth, that strength, when guided by discipline and compassion, could be a force for peace. That night, news of the battle spread across the galaxy. Footage of human ships holding the line against overwhelming odds played on every communication network. Citizens who had once feared the Deathworlders now spoke their names with respect. On dozens of worlds, people whispered, "They could have left us, but they didn't." The story became legend even before the negotiations ended. Children on distant colonies learned how the humans stood firm when others fled. Diplomats began to quote Admiral Voss's words, "Peace must be protected." When the council met again the next morning, the tone had changed completely. The delegates who once questioned humanity's presence now listened when they spoke. They realized that the Deathworlders hadn't come to rule. They had come to prove that peace backed by courage was stronger than fear backed by weakness. Somewhere above Tyrell, in the calm silence of space, the human fleet drifted like silent guardians. They didn't celebrate or boast about their victory. To them, it wasn't a triumph. It was simply their duty. The soldiers cleaned their ships, tended to the wounded, and quietly repaired the damage. They treated even captured raiders with dignity, giving them food and medical care. When asked why they would help their enemies, one human engineer shrugged and said, "Because that's what peace looks like." The word spread quickly, repeated again and again across the council chambers. Even the skeptical races began to understand. Peace didn't mean weakness. It meant having the strength to act without cruelty, the ability to hold power and still choose mercy. That day, everything changed. The aliens saw that humanity's way, peace through strength, was not a threat but a promise. And though many would never admit it out loud, a quiet respect took root in their hearts. For in the darkest moment, when fear had driven everyone else to run, it was the Deathworlders who stayed behind, who stood their ground, and who proved that actions, not words, are what truly give peace its meaning. From then on, every time the Galactic Council gathered, they remembered that battle. They remembered the humans who had faced an armada not for conquest, but for protection. And the galaxy never forgot the lesson of that day. That sometimes, words gain power only when they are backed by the courage to act. When the battle finally ended, the silence that followed was almost unreal. The sky above Tyrell, which had moments ago blazed with fire and light, was now calm. Smoke rose in slow spirals from the atmosphere, glowing orange under the distant sun. The raider fleet that had once seemed unstoppable was gone, disabled, defeated, but not destroyed. The humans had done what no one else in the galaxy would have thought possible. They had stopped a war without turning it into a massacre. From orbit, the surviving council ships began to return one by one. Their captains spoke in hushed voices over the comms, unsure of what to expect. Were the humans victorious? Were they still fighting? No one knew. But as the ships descended closer to Tyrell, the truth became clear. The human fleet was still there, holding formation like a wall of steel guardians. Their weapons were silent. Their engines glowed softly in standby mode. And between the vast hulks of their ships floated smaller vessels, rescue shuttles and medical transports, moving toward the wreckage of the raider fleet. Down on the surface, the scene was the same. Human landing teams had already begun rescue operations. The battlefield outside the council district was scattered with debris, twisted metal, and the remains of ships that had crashed during the raid. Amid that destruction, figures in white and gray suits moved steadily, carrying stretchers, scanning for survivors. They were human medics and engineers, but they were not alone. Beside them were aliens, many of whom just a day before had doubted them, even feared them. Now they worked side by side. A tall insectoid healer from the Aurelian species passed medical tools to a human doctor. A Valtari engineer helped two human soldiers lift a collapsed beam to reach trapped survivors. There was no talk of species, no division, no politics, only the shared goal of saving lives. It was something the galaxy had rarely seen. In every war before, the victors had always taken what they wanted: loot, prisoners, resources, glory. But the Deathworlders were different. They refused to take spoils. When alien officers offered them wreckage rights or captured technology, the humans simply shook their heads. "Keep it," they said. "Rebuild your homes. We don't need trophies." Even the captured raiders were shocked by their treatment. They had expected execution or imprisonment in cruel camps. Instead, human soldiers treated their wounds, gave them food and water, and even repaired their damaged life support gear. One raider, a reptilian mercenary, stared in disbelief as a human medic bandaged his arm. "Why?" he asked. "I tried to kill you," the medic smiled softly. "Because peace doesn't start by leaving people to die," she replied. That single line spread across Tyrell like wildfire. It was repeated in a dozen languages, broadcast across 100 channels. Soon everyone knew what had happened on the battlefield, that the humans had not only fought with discipline but had shown mercy to their enemies. When the Galactic Council finally gathered again, the mood was completely different. The chamber that had once been filled with fear and suspicion was now filled with quiet admiration. The delegates entered one by one, looking around at the rebuilt walls and repaired lights, all restored with human help. Some bowed their heads slightly toward the human representatives, an unspoken gesture of respect. The Valtari senator, who had once accused the humans of using power to dominate, stood and addressed the room. "Yesterday," he said, "we saw the meaning of peace through strength. These Deathworlders, these humans, showed us that true power does not destroy. It protects." A murmur of agreement spread across the chamber. Even the most skeptical species, those who had fled in panic when the raiders attacked, now sat quietly, humbled by what they had witnessed. Outside, on the fields of Tyrell, the evidence of humanity's compassion was everywhere. Temporary shelters stood for refugees, built not from alien materials but from spare panels and hull plates donated from human ships. Medical tents glowed softly under the light of Tyrell's twin moons, filled with the sound of quiet voices and heart monitors. Human soldiers guarded the perimeter, not as conquerors but as protectors, ensuring that no one would attack again. For many aliens, it was a strange sight. They had always believed the Deathworlders were wild and dangerous, a species that only knew war. But seeing them like this, moving calmly through the ruins, offering water and food to anyone in need, changed that belief forever. The most powerful moment came when Admiral Arya Voss herself walked into the refugee camp. She removed her helmet, revealing a tired but steady face. The crowd fell silent as she spoke. "This world has seen too much destruction," she said. "Let this be the place where it ends. No more borders, no more blood for pride. Today we rebuild, together." Her voice was strong but kind, and though many couldn't understand every word, her tone alone carried meaning. That evening, alien leaders gathered again to finalize what would soon be called the Peace Accords of Tyrell. For the first time in living memory, every major civilization signed a single treaty of unity. The terms were fair, balanced, and built on the foundation the humans had shown: protection, cooperation, and responsibility. There were no threats, no ultimatums. The treaty wasn't signed in fear, but in mutual respect. When the signing began, the council chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of translators. Each representative pressed their seal onto the agreement one after another. Finally, Admiral Voss added her signature on behalf of humanity. She didn't stand taller than the others, nor did she demand applause. She simply nodded once and said, "Now, let's make sure these words mean something." The applause that followed was unlike anything Tyrell had ever heard. It wasn't just noise, it was relief, gratitude, and hope all blended together. Across the galaxy, broadcasts carried the images of the signing. Billions watched as the Deathworlders, once feared as the most dangerous species alive, became symbols of peace. In the days that followed, more stories of humanity's actions began to spread. Alien reporters told of human soldiers who risked their lives to save children trapped in rubble, of medics who treated patients for days without rest, of captains who refused to let their fleets take even a single piece of plunder. These stories inspired people far beyond Tyrell. On distant worlds, young aliens began wearing the emblem of the Terran Peace Corps as a sign of courage and compassion. Some even asked to train with human units, hoping to learn what it truly meant to protect rather than dominate. For the first time, the galaxy began to see humanity not as Deathworlders but as guardians. And yet the humans themselves remained humble. When journalists asked Admiral Voss about the galaxy's new admiration for her people, she simply said, "We're not heroes. We just remember what it's like to live in fear, and we never want anyone else to feel that way again." Her words struck deeply. Every civilization had its own scars, its own history of war and suffering. But humanity's ability to rise above that pain, to turn strength into kindness, was something entirely new. As reconstruction continued, the lines between species began to blur. Mixed teams of humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing knowledge and stories. The smell of alien spices mixed with the aroma of human coffee in the camps. Music from a dozen worlds played together under the same stars. For the first time, the galaxy didn't feel divided. It felt alive. The peace accords of Tyrell became more than a document. They became a promise. And at its heart was the example humanity had set, that peace could exist, not because of fear but because of respect, cooperation, and the willingness to protect others selflessly. Years later, when people spoke of the event, they didn't just talk about the battle. They talked about what came after: the medics who refused to rest, the soldiers who guarded enemies, the leaders who signed in hope rather than fear. They talked about how when the smoke cleared, the galaxy saw the true meaning of humanity. They didn't conquer. They didn't demand tribute. They simply stood between chaos and order and chose compassion. And from that day on, every time a new conflict threatened the stars, someone would whisper a single reminder. Remember Tyrell. Remember the Deathworlders who came not to rule, but to protect. That became the legacy of humanity across the stars. Not the strongest, not the most feared, but the ones who proved that even the fiercest hearts could choose peace. Years passed since the day of the peace accords of Tyrell, but the memory of what happened there never faded. The once war-torn planet, once covered in craters and wreckage, had turned into a shining symbol of unity. Cities that were destroyed during the old conflicts now glowed under new skylines made from both alien crystal and human alloys. What was once a battlefield had become the heart of the galaxy's greatest peacekeeping center, the Galactic Grand Hall. At the center of that hall stood a monument unlike any other. It wasn't huge or overly decorated, but everyone who saw it felt its meaning deeply. The statue showed two hands clasped together, one sculpted from pale alien stone, elegant and smooth, the other forged from dark human steel, strong and weathered. The two hands met perfectly in the middle, fingers locked as if they would never let go. Beneath them, carved in both human and alien languages, was an inscription that said, "They came not to talk us into peace, but to make it possible." That single line told the entire story. It reminded everyone who came to the Grand Hall that peace hadn't come from endless debates or weak promises. It came from courage, sacrifice, and action. The Deathworlders, as the galaxy still called the humans, hadn't arrived to lecture anyone or to demand obedience. They had arrived to show what real strength meant. They had made peace something more than a dream. They had made it real. Visitors from thousands of worlds traveled across light years just to see the statue. Some came in silence, standing for long minutes before the joined hands. Others brought their children and told them the story that had become legend. The story of how humans came from a dangerous world and yet chose to use their strength to protect, not to conquer. The children listened wide-eyed, imagining the great human ships descending from the stars, not with fire and destruction, but with shields raised to defend the helpless. Every year, on the anniversary of the peace accords, a ceremony was held in the Grand Hall. The air shimmered with lights from hundreds of different species, each representing their homeworlds. Old soldiers who had fought in the wars came wearing the emblems of their worlds, some missing limbs, others with artificial eyes, but all carried a quiet pride. Human veterans stood beside alien diplomats, scientists, and engineers. There was no rank, no division, only shared respect. During these gatherings, they didn't just remember the battle. They remembered what came after, the rebuilding, the compassion, the lessons. Holograms would replay the historic footage of human medics helping the wounded, of engineers repairing alien cities, of the first moment when humans and aliens stood side by side as equals. The crowd always grew silent during those scenes, and many wept quietly. In the galaxy's schools, the story of the Deathworlders was taught as part of history. Teachers described how the humans had been misunderstood for generations. Before Tyrell, most believed that the Deathworlders were a danger to peace, too fierce to trust. But history had proved them wrong. Humans had shown that true peace didn't mean weakness. It meant the strength to protect without destroying, to fight only when absolutely necessary, and to stop fighting when the danger was gone. One old alien historian once wrote, "Peace is not born when weapons fall silent. It is born when those who hold the weapons learn when not to use them." That thought became a guiding principle across civilizations, and it was often linked to humanity's legacy. Over time, the monument in the Grand Hall became a pilgrimage site. Newly appointed leaders, soldiers, and peacekeepers made it a tradition to visit the statue before taking office. Many would touch the base of the joined hands and silently promise to uphold what the humans had taught, to protect peace, even when it required strength. In one corner of the hall, a holographic archive displayed messages recorded by the original human commanders who had served during the Tyrell crisis. Among them was the voice of Admiral Arya Voss, her tone calm and steady even after all the years. Her words were simple: peace is not fragile. It only breaks when we forget what it costs to keep it. Those words were played at every anniversary ceremony, echoing through the great marble chamber. Every time they were heard, people were reminded that peace wasn't just a moment. It was a choice that had to be made every day. Outside the Grand Hall, the world of Tyrell had changed completely. It had become a meeting ground for trade, culture, and diplomacy. The old scars of war had turned into gardens, and the skies once filled with warships now carried fleets of explorers and scientists. Human technology blended seamlessly with alien architecture. Streets glowed with soft bioluminescent lights, and in every corner, one could see humans and aliens living, working, and laughing together. Children of mixed heritage, half human, half alien, played in parks that stood where craters once were. They didn't understand the full history yet, but they grew up surrounded by peace that had been paid for by those who came before. To them, the clasped hands in the Grand Hall weren't just a statue. They were a promise that peace was possible, no matter how dark things once were. In faraway systems where conflict still threatened, commanders often invoked the lesson of the Deathworlders. It became a saying among peacekeeping forces: power without compassion is tyranny. Compassion without strength is helplessness. Balance both and you have peace. That balance, the mastery of power, was what the humans had shown the galaxy. They had not given up their weapons. They had simply learned when to lower them. They had not erased conflict from existence. They had made it controllable, containable, and above all, humane. Many alien philosophers debated for years over what made humans different. Was it their brutal homeworld that had taught them to adapt? Was it their emotional nature, their empathy, their unpredictable courage? No one could fully explain it. Some said that the true secret of humanity was that they had faced extinction countless times on their own world, wars, famines, disasters, and yet they had survived by coming together. That same instinct had guided them across the stars. As centuries passed, humanity's legend grew, but they never claimed the title of saviors. They insisted that the peace of Tyrell belonged to everyone. They built academies where alien and human cadets trained side by side. They founded the Galactic Peace Fleet, not as an army, but as a united defense force to prevent chaos. On the anniversary of the 50th year of the Peace Accords, the galaxy celebrated with a grand festival. Ships from over 300 civilizations hovered in orbit above Tyrell, their lights painting the night sky with every color imaginable. Holographic banners floated through the air, showing images of the original human fleet arriving all those years ago. During the ceremony, an elderly alien leader spoke to the crowd. When the humans came, he said, we thought they would bring war. Instead, they brought the courage to end it. They taught us that peace is not made by words alone, but by the will to protect it. No matter the cost, the audience erupted in applause. But it wasn't the loud kind that came from celebration. It was steady, respectful, almost reverent. Every clap echoed the same feeling, gratitude. And as the night ended, lights from orbit shimmered down onto the statue in the grand hall. For a moment, it looked as if the two hands, stone and steel, were glowing together. The people watching swore they could almost feel the warmth of that bond, as if the spirits of those first Deathworlders were still there, standing guard over the peace they had forged. Generations would come and go, and new challenges would arise. But the lesson of Tyrell never faded. Whenever fear or conflict began to spread again, someone would look to the sky and whisper the old words. They came not to talk us into peace, but to make it possible. That phrase became more than an inscription, it became a belief. It reminded the galaxy that true peace is not simply the absence of power, but the mastery of it. To hold power and choose not to abuse it. To be strong enough to protect, yet wise enough to know when to stop fighting. That was the gift humanity gave to the stars, the understanding that peace is not fragile, not weak, not naive. It is the greatest strength of all, held steady by those brave enough to wield power with compassion. And so, across the endless galaxy, the story of the Deathworlders lived on, not as a tale of war, but as a timeless reminder that peace is not something found. It is something made.